After its defeat in the Second Opium War, China was forced to cede Hong Kong to the British Crown. A perfect example of what came to be called gunboat diplomacy. For the next 156 years, the city became a bridgehead, exploiting all the riches of what the British called the Far East. And though Hong Kong was renowned for its freewheeling mercantilism, politically Hong Kongers were always ruled by a vast colonial administration back in London. The colonists focused on making money, while being well served by the colonized, the diligent and untroublesome Chinese. Although the British may have seen themselves as benevolent overlords, this was far from the truth. Benefactors they were not. In 1967, responding to angry street protests by striking workers opposed to harsh new factory regulations, Britain's reaction was uncompromising and deadly. In the crackdown that followed, several protesters were killed, leading to retaliation and escalating violence. In all, 51 Hong Kongers, including protesters, policemen, innocent bystanders and children, were killed. And the British were shamed into making much-needed reforms. Then in the 1990s, as they were finally closing the door on their vastly profitable colonial enterprise, the British had an uncharacteristic change of heart. Hong Kongers were urged to demand a say in their destiny. Britain called for democracy for Hong Kong, something they'd steadfastly resisted for 156 years.
Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong.
Because Hong Kong had been a British colony for so long, the people here are different from the people in mainland China. They may share their ethnic Chinese roots, but the mentality, the culture, everything is very different. And to Beijing's credit, it fully realized that.
They've both known it all along, the British and the Chinese, that Hong Kong would once again be part of China.
So what Beijing did was say, fine, we will allow you to be autonomous. You will have your own legal system, you will have your own financial system, total freedom of speech. I think they guaranteed all that for 50 years. So the idea is one country, two systems. That means Hong Kong's system is different from the rest of mainland China, but it is very much a part of China. It's one country.
Overwhelmingly, Americans are convinced that if the residents of Hong Kong could choose voluntarily, they would opt for the current system, not Beijing. Most Americans are wrong. Fully 62% of Hong Kong residents polled said they would choose to join China if the decision were up to them. And by the unsentimental measure of the marketplace, Hong Kong is bullish on Beijing.
When China first took over Hong Kong in 1997, it was an important city in terms of reversing a historical atrocity. But it's also important because this is an open, free economy. It's got a solid financial and legal foundation.
Hong Kong had become the front office to a world eager to prosper by exploiting China's rapid growth and its low-cost labor force, while British law provided legal reassurance to all manner of foreign businesses. So it was that over time, as China...
In the 80s to today, and I think we're also coming to a time in the world where we are becoming more multipolar. It is different from the world that I kind of grew up in colonial Hong Kong, looking to Britain for many ideas, the United States being the be-all and the end-all. So I accept that that's unsettling for Hong Kong people, but it depends on what view you want to take on China.
Ever since the handover, Hong Kong's government had struggled in managing a legacy of tensions and contradictions between the former colony's past and its future as a wholly Chinese city. And supporters of those two very different political realities have been at loggerheads ever since.
Thousands of people protesting a Beijing-backed plan to introduce mandatory patriotic education classes in the territory's schools. It was a move many saw as a ploy to indoctrinate Hong Kong's young people into unquestioning support for the Chinese Communist Party. Hong Kong's chief executive eventually backed down.
In 2014, despite having more autonomy than they ever enjoyed under the British, the pace of universal suffrage was still too slow for many Hong Kongers, and their protests brought the city to a standstill.
It feels like a dangerous moment. Who's in charge? The Communist Party? Or the demonstrators, who found a common voice and now intend to define their own destiny?
This is it, the last stand of Occupy Hong Kong. One by one, they were arrested and carted away.
It was a new millennium, and China's economy was expanding every year. But so too were the resentments many Hong Kongers felt towards their mainland cousins. Not so long ago, it had been easy to look down on the poverty-stricken, undereducated mainlanders. But China's economic renaissance was rapidly transforming lives and opportunities north of the border. And Hong Kong's comparative advantages began to diminish. As the bloom went off the rose, envy gradually supplanted Hong Kongers' long-held sense of superiority.
Protests by Hong Kong groups against mainland Chinese traders. According to protesters, they are making life in local border towns unbearable.
The anger has also manifested itself as antagonism towards all mainland citizens. They call them locusts and complain about them taking up hospital beds to give birth.
Meanwhile, a handful of entrenched business interests and real estate tycoons, holdovers from the city's colonial past, seemed oblivious to this mounting unrest and discontent, preferring instead to continue doing business as usual, enriching themselves at the expense of the majority of Hong Kong citizens, many of whom were still living close to the poverty line.
I do look at a lot of inequalities. Then you walk down the street and there's a Lamborghini drives past, an old lady pushing a trolley with cardboard.
Part of the reason it's kind of hard going living in Hong Kong, first of all, is the physical dimension. It is just so dense. People are so physically close to each other. Secondly is, this is a competitive town. There are many people who have to have more than one job because they need to make ends meet. Beijing have already said to Hong Kong repeatedly that you have some local socio-economic problems that you need to resolve, and I think that is true. What seemed easier is to blame China, is to blame that all these problems we have in Hong Kong is because of China. And, you know, another word that we use, not China, is because we don't have democracy. You know, the sense that perhaps if we had democracy, we could change our social economic policies. When the British departed, we also carried forward a set of what we believed were the winning strategies. Things like laissez-faire, non-intervention, small government, not dealing with the private sector, sharing of wealth and land policies and so on.
So people are cooped up. Financial pressure creates stress. So I just think it's remarkable, the people of Hong Kong, how they deal with it and how they're not just throwing punches every 5 minutes.
Hong Kong's malaise is far from unique. Similar challenges are becoming more widespread in many Western democracies, where economic hardship and widening wealth gaps have led to a loss of status and a dangerous rise in resentments. Populism, identity politics, and social media encourage people to seek out easy solutions and scapegoats. And that's where Hong Kong finds itself today, with its many smoldering problems either being underplayed or ignored entirely by a press corps preferring to lay the blame at China's doorstep, rather than examining the myriad historical grievances that are still very much alive in the city.